Hey there, it's Dave at No Recipe Required, and about twice a year I'm amazed when my wife comes up to me and says, I want a beef stew. It's one of her kind of childhood favorites that we don't frankly have all that often, but I absolutely love making them because they're so rich and delicious. You take kind of a cheap cut of beef and treat it right, and it really turns tender and absolutely delicious, absolutely wonderful. They're really pretty easy to make. We'll make kind of the broth, the beef, obviously sear it off, throw in some vegetables, and put it all together. Really, really wonderful, and I think you're going to love it. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's go ahead and start showing you how to make a beef stew. Now, there's obviously a ton of different ways to go. Many of them use a Dutch oven like I'm using here. You can use all kinds of different cuts of meat as well. You're generally looking for kind of the cheaper, tougher cuts because we're going to stew this, obviously, a few hours to get it nice and tender. What I'm using is some short rib, a good hot pan, olive oil, and then you just want to spread that meat out into kind of one layer and get it nicely browned all around. So just like I was searing a steak, or if I was searing a steak, what I'm going to do here is let it just cook on one side, brown. We'll come in, stir it all over, get it browned on all sides. Then we'll come back, start adding some of the other ingredients. So it's been a few minutes, and one quick thing I forgot to show you. Because I'm using short ribs, I've got the bone, and I'm going to throw that in as well. Cook the bones with it, adds a little bit more flavor, and the marrow, as it dissolves, it kind of adds a little bit of texture to the stew as well. So I haven't touched, I haven't stirred or anything yet. We'll go ahead and take a look, and we're looking pretty good. You definitely want some of that browning on the pieces of beef, and I think I'm going to just turn this, get everything moved around once, and then I'm going to shut it down, or not shut it down, I'm going to shut the camera off and let it go a few more minutes until we've got a little bit more color on all that great beef. So as you cook the pieces of beef, what you may get, which I've got here, is a good bit of moisture down in the bottom of the pan, and that's coming out of the meat, obviously. Now that's going to prevent really getting the nice brown you want, but if you just keep at it long enough, keep cooking it, then eventually that's going to evaporate away, and you'll be able to go ahead and get all the browning you want. You want to be able to see kind of brown bits sticking to the bottom of the pan. So I think this is going to take about another 7 minutes or so, 5-7 minutes. And then we'll come back. Okay, so that's the kind of browning you're looking to see on the beef before we pull it out of the pan. You get all that great flavor now caramelized down at the bottom of the pan. I'm going to add an onion now, a finely chopped yellow onion. Now it's a matter of preference how finely you want to chop it. Some people like to leave it in chunks. That's totally fine. You may need to add a touch more oil to the pan, a little bit of salt, just to start rendering some of the juices out of the onion. And I'm just going to stir this now over kind of medium heat until the onion is a little soft and translucent. So I just added about 5 cloves of garlic about 30 seconds ago. You want to give them just about that much time to soften up a little bit, release some of their essential oils, and then we're going to deglaze with red wine. Now I happen to be using a Pinot Noir, which is based on Burgundy grapes. This is a California, but it's a little bit obviously like beef bourguignon, beef stew. And I'm going to add that to deglaze the pan. We're going to go in with a wooden spoon and scrape up all those yummy bits. That was probably a full cup or so. And I'm just going to let this come up to a simmer and reduce by half. And while that's happening, you can go ahead and add herbs to your stew here. I'm using some fresh rosemary. Probably about a tablespoon and a half or so. I've got a few bay leaves, and I've also got a little bit of fennel seed. The herbs are really up to you. Lots of different ones can be really, really good. These just happen to be 3 of my favorites. So our wine's reduced down by about half now. We're going to add back our beef. And now we haven't really put a lot of salt in here as well. We didn't season the meat before we started cooking. It was really just the vegetables. So we can add a couple pinches. And you do want to season early so that everything kind of has a chance to permeate through and blend together. Give a few good grinds of fresh ground black pepper, and then we're going to cover everything with beef stock. Now, if it's your preference, you can certainly use chicken stock, although I don't know why you would. If you open a little hole in the box like that, it'll come out faster. And what you want to do is basically cover everything by a couple inches. I'm going to come back and add eventually some carrots and potatoes to the dish. But the meat's going to take probably 2 hours to really get nice and fork tender where I want it. potatoes, carrots only take about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and bring this up to a simmer. I'm gonna add a little bit more stock. We'll bring it up to a simmer and just let it go on low as you can get. We'll cover it so it just barely simmers, and really that's it. You just let it sit for 2 hours, then we'll come back. My stew's been going now for about 2.5 hours, but you know, you can't really overcook it. What you're really looking for is for the beef to be nice and tender, or at least pretty darn tender. Because what we're gonna do, that's almost done. We're gonna add, I go equal parts carrot and potato. You can certainly throw in other vegetables here. Almost anything is great. Now they're only going to take, see how I cut them kind of the same size as the beef chunks, and they're only going to take about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour to get tender. You can certainly let them go longer if you like those soft vegetables, but I like them just kind of tender all the way through. We're going to let those go, keeping it on a simmer, covered. We'll come back when it's time to thicken up our stew. So I've simmered off the stew until the carrots and the potatoes are done. And what I've got here is a couple tablespoons of cornstarch mixed with water. And I'm just going to add that to my stew, and that's going to be the thickening agent to the stew. Now you may have to end up adding a couple batches if you don't get thin enough. If you over thicken, you can always just add a little bit more stock to it. You do have to bring the pan up to a boil, just a light boil, to get the kind of full thickening power. Then adjust any final seasoning, salt and pepper, and we'll be good to serve this up. So I add a little bit more cornstarch, but I've now got it to the thickness I want. My last step is going to be to add about half a cup of frozen peas at the very end. You do want to give it a little taste. Make sure the seasoning is spot on for you. This one could use a little more salt. Those peas, you know, everything's so hot in here, those peas are going to cook in about a minute. So you really just want to add them in the end, keep that nice bright green color. And we're good to go. Let's go ahead and plate up our beef stew. Okay, so I just plated up our beef stew. I'm going to go ahead and serve mine with a couple of these homemade biscuits. It is absolutely wonderful. I think you're going to love it. And I'll see you next time on No Recipe Required.